Dr. Manning, thank you for being here today. We're super excited to have you on our podcast. Your book has made a huge impact on me personally. So it was about 4 years ago. At the time, I was in a sales role and I was struggling with, I was kind of choking during sales meetings. It's the best way to say it. And your book was recommended to me by someone else on my team. And reading your book absolutely changed, I would say, the trajectory of my career when it came to kind of pressure-filled moments and feeling a lot of anxiety and fear going into something. So how we're going to approach today is Britt and I, we each have a couple questions, general questions we decided on together. And then we each kind of have 2 or 3 aspects from the book that we're really curious to talk to you about. So the first general question: why did you write the book in general? And what did you have in mind behind the title, The Fearless Mind?
Yeah, so first, I was working and we had 2 kids, and you know Mackenzie because you grew up with her. We had 2 kids in diapers. I was working a couple of jobs, and I finished my PhD, and it took me a little bit longer to finish it because we were so busy with these other things. And so I had a full-time job. Was coaching tennis on the side, and we got these 2 kids, and I get done and I just felt impressed to write a book. Mackenzie's like, what? Aren't we getting into the field? When we're going to actually see some benefits from all of this sacrifice? It was a lot of work. And I just felt impressed that I wanted to write a book. I thought that this field of mental performance was really untapped. And in psychology, I would really organize it. There's like 3 areas of psychology. There's the clinical, which is more deep-seated issues. Then there's counseling, which is more the mental health side. And then there's mental performance, which I always thought was completely different, because we got to learn skills and build resilience to be able to perform under pressure and to unlock our potential, as well as accelerating skill development. So I'd always been passionate about that, and always had that I wanted to figure out kind of the map of how you build it. I just never believed that some people have it and others don't, because I witnessed one of my friends who I grew up playing tennis with. We used to travel together. We'd actually sleep on the floor in hotel rooms all the time because both of us struggled with some lower back problems. And so we'd sleep on the floor and we'd talk about tennis all the time. And I ended up getting selected on an Australian team ahead of him and played on the tour for a while before I came to the States. And then I watched him go from struggling to make it on the tour to number 1 in the world while I was there at BYU. And I knew it wasn't the physical, because I could always beat him physically, but his mind was always so good. And so I was fascinated by that. And so to me, that always seemed to be the answers. So I get done with my PhD and I'm like, I want to write a book on this. And as I started writing the book, it was more for my own benefit. I'm like, I'm not a writer. I just love the science. And as I started writing it, I realized how many gaps were in the research. And so as I found all these gaps, I would just study it and try to figure it out to fill in the gaps, and really, again, wrote the book for myself. And it's such a purification when you write a book. It helps you to really understand the science at a depth you don't realize, and how you can talk about it, explain it, and how it all makes sense. And that's what it did for me. I had no idea anyone would buy the book, and nor did I really care. I just wrote it really because I felt impressed and because I needed it for myself. But there's some things I learned writing that book that it still helps me to this day. So yeah, very amazing experience trying to figure all of that out.
That's so fascinating to me. And it's interesting. Obviously, playing in Philadelphia, we have on our staff a mental health counselor, right, and a mental performance, because, you know, if anybody who follows sports knows, it can be pretty difficult to play in Philadelphia,
right,
with the pressure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I relate to all this a lot. I just love having you here. Something that is interesting to me, I would love to ask you just how you define high performance, because your book's all about high performance. And I feel like it's really easy in sports to define high performance, but your book relates to all of life. And I would just be interested to hear just a definition for that.
Yeah, and it's interesting as I've evolved because I keep studying. That's one of the biggest things I've learned. You got to keep learning all the time, always learn. And I learned actually, funny enough, from Jerry Seinfeld that we can talk about later. But I actually changed the language as I understood this more to human performance, because what I realized at the beginning, understanding high performance is one thing, which is learning how to unlock the talent you have and to perform. That's what to me is unlocking and using all of the skills you have. But what I realized, there's a massive human element to this. High performance, I felt like in the first little bit that I was helping build almost robots, that everyone was the same. And there was this ceiling that I noticed people would get to, and they couldn't get beyond that. And the more I studied, I realized the human element was critical. So I changed it to human performance. And so I added a few things. I learned, doing my dissertation, the 5 key areas of performance. But then I found out there was some more steps before that of helping people really identify who they are. And I found this to be incredibly important in athletics, but in life. And Sigmund Freud is a bit crazy as he was. If you're really taking some upper level psych classes, the guy is a bit of a whack job when you really play it, how crazy he took some things. But one of the things I love that he said he believed that everyone comes to this world with like gifts, like they come with, I would put language on that now as strengths, that we all have certain strengths that we're born with, that we come to this world. And he said, one of the keys to success is helping to identify what those strengths are. I'm going to use my own language, strengths, and developing those strengths. And there is no research out there that has ever disproven that. Which means if the research can't disprove it, it's pretty much there. It's just so hard to prove because it's so subjective. But what I found over and over again in athletics, in business, in life, helping people identify what their core strengths are really gives you that belief of something tangible to believe in about you. And that's critical, to know who you are, know what your strengths are, and own that. Then from that beginning, so having that strong identity, who you are, then build skills on top of that. Whereas so many people, Tom Brady said it best in your sport, he said, most people are average in this world because they work hard on things that don't matter. But the best work hard on skills specifically designed to help them get where they want to go. I love that. What I've learned is it's critical for people to help know who they are, what their identity is, and what their strengths are, then build skills that build from that. And as you do that, you're helping these people really learn to trust themselves and to become the best version of themselves, and to unlock that to where I would say at the end, I'm trying to help people become their authentic self and to really be unapologetic about themselves. And if you don't mind, can I keep going for a sec here? Because I love this.
Oh, yeah.
So like to make this super real, going into Game 6, 2021 NBA championship, I worked closely with Giannis Antetokounmpo for years. And I live back in Milwaukee. Mackenzie still lives there for a little while because I had to get out. They still owned my third-year team option to come back to Utah early. So we live on the same road as Giannis. And so I'd go over to his house at night. Game 6, I turn up, and he opens the door, and he says to me, "Doc, I don't owe you anything." I'm like, okay, this is Game 6 of the NBA championship. Where are we going with this? And he's like, I just really don't owe anyone anything. I'm just really in a good place with who I am, what my strengths are. And he says, we called it being unapologetically ourselves. And the guy went and scored 50 points in the Game 6, the only person that's ever scored 50 to close out an NBA championship. And what I believe that is an application of the science. Like, you get to this point, you know who you are, and you trust yourself that you really just don't care what other people think, and you can just go and perform at your best in the biggest moment. And I've just seen that repeated over and over again, helping people identify who they are, build their skills so that they trust themselves and they can just go and perform.
What you just described, Dr. Manning, is very similar to what I've heard Britt talk about. So Britt, I'll let you say it. I just want to interject because I think it aligns perfectly. No, I love it. I absolutely love this. When I talk to, I get people asking me all the time, about athletics, especially parents with their kids. Anytime there's an undersized kid that's like me, the parent always wants to know what I did and things. But yeah, my grandpa had a quote that I kind of made the identity of my athletic career. He talks about build on your strengths and then organize to make weaknesses become irrelevant.
Yeah,
And
right.
to me, yeah, to me, that's been everything. And obviously I'm always the smallest player on my team
Right.
at all times. And in the recruiting process, you know, I had a lot of people just obsess over bulking me up, getting me bigger. And I just kept thinking to myself, even if I do get a little bigger, I'm still going to be average in that area. It's not going to help me, right? That Tom Brady quote. So I've focused on kind of the two things that have made me unique. And that's the reason why I'm, you know, still playing football. I've seen that with many people. So I love that. I've seen that with great athletes, some of the best athletes in the world. So I love that you share that. My question with all of this is, I feel like once again with sports, it's such a physical representation where I feel like it's so easy to point out your strengths, right? It's so easy to point out my weakness of not being able to hardly bench 225 pounds. But you know, my strengths are quickness or my mental aspect of the game. It's just a lot easier to identify with sports. How do you go through this in your book about things that are less easy to identify, you know, in life, in the workplace, not things that are not as obvious?
I don't, the book, I do a little bit, but there's so much that I've learned since I wrote the book. There's a couple of things you said. That uniqueness is critical, like owning who you are and knowing your strengths and building skills. It creates that uniqueness. So there's no competition with others. And that's really critical. We're not competing with other people. We're competing with who we used to be. It's always a competition with ourselves towards getting better. And that's massive because this is the slippery slope from research. Comparison is bad because comparison leads to insecurities. Insecurities leads to needing approval from the world. And as soon as you do that, you're giving your locus of control away. That creates an out-in mindset where you're reactive. That's where what fear is. So comparison leads to insecurities. Insecurity leads to needing approval. And needing approval leads to the inferiority-superiority complex, which is really one complex. So like if I'm around somebody that my bald head is smoother than theirs, I feel superior than them. But then if I'm around somebody that has a full head of hair, I feel inferior. Can you see that spiral? And that's what competition is. You're always comparing yourself to others and you get stuck in your development. But when you embrace who you are and you work on the skills around what you are, there's no end to your development and you become unique. And so I love that you said that. There's one other thing, like for me, I grew up, think about this for a minute before we move past this topic for a sec. I grew up in a big tennis family back in Australia. Everyone, my grandparents played into their 90s. My uncle was over all the junior tennis in Australia for a while. Older cousin played pro, younger cousin played pro. I'm 6'2" and I'm skinny and I could not gain muscle for the life of me because I just burn it in one workout. But my whole life always thinking I had to be a power player and I had to gain muscle and I had to do this and build all these things. And I was working on the wrong skills. Had I gone back, what is my strength? What are the things I'm best at? And there's a simple formula to figure this out, and it's always evolving. I'm really quick, not fast. I'm slow over 100 meters, but I'm lightning quick over a tennis court distance. So I'm super quick. That's something that is genetics. I'm long. I'm also my slice backhand. Now mechanics, my slice backhand was always my strength, except I always thought I had to hit over the ball. Can you see these ideas that we think we always have to be somebody else? And so therefore I'm skinny, trying to be somebody I'm not. So I worked on the wrong skill. These skills I worked on were never helping me.
Yeah.
So instead, if I went back, I'd go like, okay, what's your strength? You're quick. You've got a slice backhand. Now build skills around that. All my skills should have been around movement, should have been around getting to every ball, should have been around my slice backhand, keeping the ball deep, building my strategies and my skills around that. Now what happens to your development when you're building skills that are built around your strengths? Here's another example. So many people working at BYU, and I'm not sure who this goes out to, but so many young athletes come back, male and female, they'll sit down. I say, okay, what do you want? What's your goal? I want to be an NBA player. I want to be the NFL, or I want to be a pro runner. I'm like, okay, so what are you going to work on? Well, I'm going to work hard. Work hard on what? I'm going to work hard on everything. No. that's going to guarantee mediocrity. You will not make it working hard on everything. You cannot. You got to figure out your strengths, and I help them identify that and break it down. And then we got to work on skills that build from your strengths. You do that, there's no limit to your potential. And that's what everyone thinks there's this stereotype of who you have to be. The key to success is being the best version of yourself. And one more comment, like Bronson Kafusi, we've talked so many times because I was working with him for years, even once he was in the NFL. They wanted him to bulk up too, Britain. Same thing. And he bulked up to like 300 pounds and he couldn't move. Then the coaches were getting mad at him because he couldn't move. And it's like, got to get back to the weight that was best for him. He gets back to the weight that was best for him. And they're like, where was this? I'm like, seriously, we got to own who we are. The coaches are just doing their best, but we have to own who we are. And I just love that for life. Let's get away from sports in a minute. Just embrace who you are. Own who you are. I love being bold. I'm more aerodynamic. I'm quicker. I never have a bad hair day. I love it. Like, embrace who you are and own it. If you decide to wear purple socks one day, own that you wear purple socks. Like, embrace who you are and just own it. It makes life so fulfilling just trying to be yourself.
I'm thinking of a parallel, like in a business setting. In a past career, I ran a sales team, and we had someone on the sales team that was incredible in front of people, but maybe struggled on the back end with paperwork, following up, things of that nature. Yeah, which is fine, but it's kind of part of the job. And so the way we approached it is, let's not have him focus on that stuff. Let's organize around his strengths and get him out in front of people, and then let's build a team kind of behind him to take care of some of this other stuff that it just wasn't worth spending time for him doing. So that may be like a business application. But one of the things you mentioned that just barely is you're talking about working with college athletes and they have a goal. And that's a question I wanted to ask you about. It's something I struggle with around setting a goal or an objective. I think growing up, I always was focused on outcome goals, right? Like winning a championship or making it to the NFL, like some type of outcome. But as I've grown and I've read works like yours and others, it seems like the focus more should be on things that you have full control over rather than focusing on outcomes. But at the same time, I feel like it's kind of a paradox because you also want to have a vision, a goal, an objective. So I'm kind of convoluted in my thinking, but I really wanted to hear your perspective and take on that. When setting a goal, when setting an objective, how do you balance setting like a big goal that is a great objective or vision, but not being 100% focused on the outcome, but at the same time, you want to be focused on the outcome? I don't know. I always have a question around this. Yeah.
So one of the things, both, I'm older than you guys, but you're still, we have to be careful of the generation we're raised in. So our identity and was tied to our success from a baby boomer Gen X generation standpoint. And so we're raised by baby boomers. And so that's very much a generational thing, that our identity is tied to the goals and setting goals and working hard to it. And what I learned from Socrates, actually, who's the first one to really break down the concept of happiness. And he broke down happiness into 4 areas in 4 levels. First is material objects. Second was ego-bound achievement. Okay. Third is doing good. But one of the things is there's 3 happiness neurotransmitters that motivates. And the reason why I'm talking about happiness is what motivates us. In dopamine, which we all talked about, here's the very definition of dopamine. Dopamine comes from the anticipation of something in the future, which is what goals are. It's the anticipation of it, which creates this motivation to act. But the problem is you never achieve it because dopamine only comes from the idea that's out there. And so the problem is once you do achieve it, you need another mountain to climb or another goal to achieve. So you're always chasing it. So it's unstable. It still is a happiness neurotransmitter, but our generation, we relied too heavily just on that for our identity. The more stable happiness neurotransmitter is serotonin, which is in the present, in reality, in what you are doing. And that's why gratitude is so powerful. But the third one that most people have never heard of, the third happiness neurotransmitter is anandamida. And anandamida is the one that is the best one because it stimulates your own happiness. And the reason why, so now coming back to goals, goal setting is good to give you direction, but here's something else I've also learned. You can't know what you really want until you first know who you are. Otherwise, that goal is not your goal. It's somebody else's goal, and it doesn't create the purpose to get you in the flow state to actually work towards it. So what's super important at first is to always build from reality. Always build from who you are here. That's where serotonin is. Who am I? This is who I am. This is my reality. And then rather than to distinguish the difference, have goals or objectives that incentivize you. So that incentivize creates the motive to go and act. But you're not defining your identity by achievement. You're defining who you are by who you are is where that stable serotonin and anandamida neurotransmitter comes from. The goal is just to stimulate the action. So like now, don't define myself over the goals. The goals are just something I want to achieve because it makes me happy. It's not my identity. Like I wanted to win another championship. I worked with the Cavaliers and we won one there, and I worked with the Bucks and we won one. I want 3. I want one more. Not because it defines me, just because I want it. Because I like chasing. I like that. But I'm happy with who I am, knowing my strengths, knowing my skills. I'm happy with who I am. It's just the objective is what it is that I want, which so many people struggle with that because they think that's selfish. It's not selfish. The goal that motivates you, that gives you purpose, is the goal that around what you really want. So it's not defining who you are. And by the way, Socrates talked about the 4th level, which he called the sublime level of what creates happiness. He called it sublime beatitude. And sublime is transcendence, meaning who are you and who are you becoming? That is the most stable thing that motivates us, is who we are and who we are becoming is the highest level. That triggers the anandamida neurotransmitter, which is the best one of the 3 because it's stable. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And how you describe it, it resonates with me. I feel like I'm in the middle of this journey in some ways of reorienting myself around having healthy goals that are good, not defining myself completely by the outcomes or certain things I can't control.
Just like you said, you're on this journey. You're kind of in the middle between the Gen X generation and the Gen Y. And we're evolving all the time, we're learning all the time. And just one of the things I would always say is with goals, that's very much a Gen X and a baby boomer generation thing. And when we hear about goals, it's nearly always from one of those 2 generations. And again, goals are big, but remember the sole purpose in a goal is just to give you direction. That goal is not to define who you are. It's just the sole purpose in the goal is to give you that direction of where you want to go. Your identity in life is happening here in the present. And too many people live their lives out in the future that never actually ever arrives. And so that's why they struggle with the highs and lows of life, and they struggle with their identity too much because it's too dependent on the future that is always uncertain.
I love that. Curious, what about Gen Z and this upcoming generation? What is their thing? What's their niche?
They're like Gen Y. It's really simple, right? Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. Gen Zs are just basically on Red Bull of Gen Ys. Like they're just doing everything faster. But it is super interesting why I bring up the generations, because human thought is language. It's not like language, it is language. Like human thought is language. How you talk to yourself is what thoughts are. And language comes from the culture and the generation you're raised in. So somebody raised in the baby boomer generation, they think like that way because that's the environment they're raised in. And then what changed? There was a generational war that most of us don't even realize there was a war. But going back to the traditionalist, baby boomer, and Gen X, all 3 of those generations are very much a hierarchy generation where information and knowledge streamed down from parents, teachers, and religious leaders. But with the invention of radio and then invention of TV, that broadened the knowledge and your awareness of yourself and the world. But with the invention of the internet in 1993, it changed everything because now information is coming from everywhere. And so now there's no less filters on the information, and it completely changed. And that's the generational war between baby boomers and Gen Xers and millennials. And the war was over the communication, and that changed how we view things and how we see things. And knowing that and being able to communicate to motivate the different generations, knowing how to connect with them, I find really important. And that's what I see in the athletic world. Britain, coming to you, it's big time, I'm sure, in the NFL. It's big time in the NBA. I constantly spend my life bridging the gap between the coaches and the players, because the players are here talking amongst themselves on their cell phones all the time, very interconnected. And the coaches are kind of old school, wanting everybody just to do it their way. And they're trying to lay down the law, and the players are going a different direction, trying to bring them together. And there's some really cool research around the different cultures that I believe came from these generations. And I'm going to say this, like the best teams are the ones that have a collaborative culture where we're sharing and working together. And you think about that. So my wife and I, Mackenzie and I, we used to have a cabin up in Island Park for a while. So we've seen grizzly bears in the wild. We had to get bear training having a cabin up there, because sometimes we go up to the cabin and there's a little causeway to get on the island, and there'd be a sign at the gate saying, "Beware, there's a bear on the island." And we're like, "Holy." So you have to get bear training of whether it's a black bear, brown bear, or grizzly. And we've seen them in live. Man, they're fearsome creatures, a grizzly. You don't lay down, or you run if you see a grizzly. You just don't hang around.
Yeah.
But they're not top of the food chain. A pack of wolves are top of the food chain in North America. But you see a wolf by itself, that's not much bigger than a dog. How on earth is a pack of wolves higher up than a bear? Well, because they collaborate. Every single member of that pack has their own strengths and has their own roles, and they all communicate and work together as a collective whole. Every single one of them has their own identity, but that identity is connected to the rest of the pack. And there is a leader, but that leader is out in front, not up above. You think about that. That's why we lost against the Indiana Pacers. This is why the teams, the modern day team is a collaborative team, not a hierarchy.
Yeah.
And that's why you see teams like the Lakers and these older teams, it's not about how many stars you have on the team. It's how good the team collaborates.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, that's so fascinating to me as well. I even just compare our team 2 years ago that went to the Super Bowl, right, to our team last year, and just the subtle little differences that there was in culture. We were so lucky to have guys like Jason Kelsey, right, who really were in a different generation than a lot of these rookies coming in and me. But like you said, they were able to collaborate and, I don't know, build a culture where everybody's personality was kind of accepted. You know, it's kind of like the DBs are a lot more free-flowing, and you got to let them be that.
Of culture.
Right. But then the offensive linemen are a lot more strict, sturdy, you know, kind of in a box. Anyways, that's very interesting. I also, at the very end of this, would love to just come back to the idea. I'm so fascinated by just that combination of all three, right? The serotonin, the dopamine, and I forget what the other word is, but
and Indomida. Yeah.
Right. I love the idea of kind of trying to almost have those three circles and fill those three cups. Have a goal, but know who you are first. So at the end, remind me, I kind of want to finish with that question. There is something I have been wanting to ask you, because I feel like it's something that I've felt a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will relate to it, just to kind of switch gears a little bit. I love the idea of having confidence in yourself, right? You talk a lot about confidence in your book and how that, right, learning erases fear, having confidence in yourself erases fear. What about when an authority figure comes into the room? Because it's one thing to be nervous about the public perception of you, but another thing when there's an authority figure like your boss, right? I take, for example, in our practices, there's only so many times the head coach can be with your group. And so that happens for maybe 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, it's like our group always tenses up just a little bit more. Right. And I imagine, you know, how teachers, when the principal, like once a semester, will go in the back of the classroom to watch. And our teacher, I would always see it on their faces, would just tense up and get nervous. Or in a sales meeting, I'm sure people are really good at it. And then the one time that their boss is in, they start to get nervous. I'm just curious if you've thought about that at all, that idea of authority figures and how to handle the fear or pressure that they might put on you.
But going back to these 5 cultures really helps me to understand that. And I mean, there's obviously a lot that we could talk about. But for me, what I've learned is, again, if going back to what we talked about, if you know who you are, you know your strengths, and you know you're unique, and everyone has their own unique strengths. We're all different. And so we have our own strengths. And I know all of the skills I've worked on, which in my field, we call that being consciously competent, knowing your thoughts, because awareness is key, right? Without awareness, the opposite of awareness is blind spots or ignorance. And you think about how dangerous that is when something's in your blind spot. So intelligence is awareness. The more aware you are of who you are and the skills you've developed, and the more unique and comfortable you are with yourself, you're unapologetic because you know what you're good at. The head coach is hopefully good at what they go through, but also understanding the different generations and the evolution. I'm big on evolution because as we evolve, you learn so much more. So say somebody comes in a room that's like a head coach. Honestly, I'm at a stage of my career, I don't care because I know who I am. I don't know what I'm good at. And I'm not saying I'm better than others in their other area. You're just confident in who you are and the skills you develop. That's not pride, because pride comes from comparison. So when you know who you are and you're confident in yourself, but you know you got to be humble and keep learning all the time, somebody will come in, I just don't care because I know who I am and how I like to do things and what works for me. And it's almost like we're just equals. That's that flat culture. It's like when I was speaking the other day and your dad was there, I saw him, I met him on the way. And I didn't think about it anymore because I had to execute what I wanted to execute. Well, I mean, your dad is somebody I love and, revere all of everything he's done in his area, but still, I'm going to do it my way. Even when I speak so many times in the business world, I did a big, big one down in Vegas and they're like, hey, we need your slide deck. I said, slide deck? What generation are you from? Slide deck? I'm not doing a slide deck. Well, we got this massive big screen here. So what are we going to put up on it? I stress them out so bad, the event people that put on the events. I'm like, I'm good. I don't need anything. They're like, what? You're speaking for 3 hours. No, I'm good. I turn up with a piece of paper and they're just dressed so bad. We got an iPad for you. It's up there. So you can draw on the iPad and it can go on the screen. I'm like, guys, that's not who I am. This is who I am. This is what I'm good at. I'm not getting outside of it. I've never used an iPad up on stage at all. I'm not going to start now. And that's the biggest thing I've learned is don't try to be somebody you're not. And I get up there with a piece of paper and I talk about the science I know and I use stories and I know my areas of how I do it. And they're always, I don't know, you need to be humble, but I know who I am and I know what I'm good at. I'm going to stick to it and I'm going to keep trying to get better. And if I do that, it always works out well. The only time doesn't work out, it was when I start trying to be somebody I'm not. And that's the key thing is when you know who you are, it doesn't matter about the authority figures anymore because this is your lane. I'll even go further. Like there's times, with the Bucks and different things, and the GM for the Bucks is unreal. But there's sometimes that some of these people that like the GM, an authority figure, he'll say to me, there's a few times he's like, well, I don't want to tell you to do your job, but I just want to say this. I'm like, well, you are telling me how to do the job.
Yeah.
But this is the area when you know who you are. This is what a commitment culture is, by the way. This is what a collaborative commitment culture is from the research. You own your lane. You're responsible for your lane and you own it. And you have huge accountability for your lane. And that's where the autonomy comes. You have autonomy in your lane. And there's a few times I'm like, oh, no. This is my area. This is my field. I'm the expert in this. So I want to do it this way because I'm going to be responsible for it in the end. If I do it the way you want me to do it, now I can't be responsible for that because that's not what I believe is the right way to do it. And that's what a commitment culture is when people really know what their roles and responsibilities are and it's clear what their lane is, then they own it. And when they own it, that's when people really thrive, when they own it. So yeah, an authority figure I don't really worry about them. I always be respectful to them always and hope they're respectful to me, but never disrespectful, but I own my area and I'm responsible for it always.